Hello, and welcome back to the Personal Transformation Experience podcast. Today, we're going to talk about divorce and co-parenting and strategies that work for effective co-parenting. Unfortunately, divorce is all too common these days, and statistics are really all over the place. But most of the research I found says about half of marriages end in divorce, and about 40% of marriages that end in divorce involve children under the ages of 18. And that's something that we, Maureen and I, know a lot about. We were both married before, and when we met each other almost 16 years ago, we were separated from our spouses, not yet formally divorced, and we had children ranging from 4 to 6, who today are now ranging from 20 to 22. How would you describe, from your seat, the experience of trying to, at that time, being separated from your spouse and trying to set up effective co-parenting from day one?
In a word? No, I won't curse. Not yet anyway. It was very challenging. It was probably one of the most challenging things I've ever had to experience. It was stressful. The idea of not seeing my child 24/7 was sickening. I mean, literally, it was all I can do to keep my shit together and not just collapse in a puddle of dysfunction because I had to worry about my kid. It was really, really difficult. I was not on the same page with her father. He was angry and used her, basically weaponizing my child against me, would use her as a means to get back at me.
And let's face it, most people that get divorced aren't getting divorced in good terms.
No.
They aren't getting divorced because they're great friends and they just decide to live apart. I mean, it might happen, but it's not common.
Yeah, I mean, more than not. Some do get divorced and it's amicable and they're both reasonable people, but that I think it's rare. I wish it wasn't, but I think it is. And more times than not, I hear a lot of really, really scary stories and just heart-wrenching stories. And I think, now looking back and what I've learned, I really think that, because every situation is so unique, I have to look at my notes because I have so much to say about this.
Yeah.
And emotions, you have all the emotions that go along with getting a divorce. I mean, and like you said, the parents are usually not on good terms. Maybe somebody was there was an infidelity, somebody, cheated on you, or there was substance abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse. I mean, something went wrong. And I think one of the most important things, if you can do it, is to get a therapist and both of you go, do everything you can to get together and focus on your children. Because if they're young, even if they're older, but usually if they're really young, I mean, they are going to end up being collateral damage if you don't. It's really that, intense. It's traumatic. But it doesn't have to be traumatic if they have a loving and compassionate place to process their emotions with both their parents. If they see their parents working together to make this an easy transition, because let's face it, I mean, people are going to get married, they're going to get divorced. Like you said, the statistics are really high. And for every one marriage, another one gets a divorce. Yeah. So it's part of life. And I think that, children are going to have to deal with adversity. And this is a big one. And if your child can come through that and get to the other side and realize, wow, I'm okay with, minimal damage, emotional damage, then I think you did a good job. But that means you and your ex-partner getting together, seriously seeing a therapist. You can't do it by yourself. If you think you can, I think you're foolish.
Right.
I don't think anybody can because there's too many emotions. So you do need a third partner and you need to get these feelings out. You need to get things off your chest. You need to be able to talk to that person and find some common ground, which is going to be your children. If they're the most important thing right now, and they should be, because you made a choice to get married, you made a choice to have children, and you now made a choice to get divorced, which is fine. It's probably for the best. However, those children have to go along. They don't have any choices.
Right.
So if in that respect, that's why you have to put the children first, like their emotions, dealing with it, and get together and talk to them together. Make sure you're both on the same page. If you can come together on nothing, you should be able to come together for the well-being of your children. And I think that's the number one thing I would say.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you wholeheartedly on this. And I think the other thing I wanted to make sure that we make clear is that as a parent in this situation, your primary goal should be, yes, making sure that emotionally their needs are met, but also keeping them safe too. Because a lot of people, you're going to use an attorney, you're going to go through the courts, you might have a custody battle, you might have all these things. And what the courts really only care about are the children safe. They don't care about emotional trauma.
No.
Or how this is going to affect them 10 years from now.
No.
That's your job as a parent to care about that. No lawyer is going to make sure that your kids are protected from emotional trauma. And what they are going to make sure they're protected from is being in unsafe situations, like being with a parent who's driving while under the influence of drugs or alcohol.
Right.
Or is openly using drugs in the house, or is
physically
abusing them, or drinking excessively in front of them. Now, even if you have a partner that's an alcoholic, unless you have it written to your agreement that a partner can't drink in front of your child, that may not be something you'll be able to control.
Listen, even if you have it written into your agreement, there's nobody at his house watching him while that child is alone with him. Her or him, right? Well, I say him because
so there are things that are going to be outside of your control, and there's no court or whatever it's going to enforce certain things. And so that's why it's so important for you, right, as you said, therapy, make sure you're in the right place, have the right mindset, because you've got to be in a place where you can help your child, navigate the situation and work through their own feelings.
Yes, it's very important that you help that child process their feelings. I mean, it's going to be different in both households. I mean, one parent's going to parent differently. You may not agree, but as long as they're safe and the other person is not doing anything to, talk about like negative. There's a whole Bill of Rights for children, and it's really long, and it's something that we can attach here, on this podcast. It's really important. And unfortunately, as I was reading them, none of them were really upheld on my side, on my ex's side.
Right.
It was very unfortunate. So I was scary. But if you think for one, if you have any inkling that your partner, your children might not be safe, you need to bring that to the forefront and don't be afraid to do so.
Right.
These are your children, right? So they have your number one priority is to keep them safe.
Yeah.
And if you feel like they're not safe for any reason, this is critical. But again, getting together with that person, and hopefully they're reasonable enough where you guys have to put your egos on a shelf, put yourself on a shelf. It's not about you right now. You're taking care of yourself.
It's not about winning or losing.
No, it's about taking care of the children. As far as I'm concerned.
People get hung up on winning or losing.
No, yeah.
And your children are not a pawn.
No.
They're not a game piece.
Right. And usually they end up that way, and it's really unfortunate because parents can't get out of their own way. They can't see past their anger, their ego, their mistrust, but you have to find a way to trust each other. You have to find common ground, and that's why therapy is so critical, a third person to come in, and that doesn't end when the papers are signed.
Yeah.
That should continue throughout the young lives of your children. I believe, looking back, this is what I would have done. I would have I would have made the court make him go to therapy with me to work on co-parenting.
Yeah.
That's my situation. I mean, everybody's different. You may not have to do that, but I still think it's good.
You bring up a good point because and I don't say this from I regret what I did, but just kind of unwinding. If I had an opportunity to do something different based on what I've learned, I would have tried mediation first rather than going through divorce attorneys.
I was going to say that.
I think mediation, if you do it right, there's a component to you're trying to do what's best for the family unit and keeping as much, especially for the children, intact as possible while separating. And you do it together. Right, as opposed to I've got my attorney, you got your attorney, and they're like two dogs going at it, which is kind of what my divorce was like. And I will take accountability and responsibility. I drove that. I drove that because I was angry, and I allowed the anger and the rage that I felt, whether it was justified or not. That's not what I'm here to discuss. A lot of it had to do with my background and the way my parents were with each other. The way I went about it wasn't the best for the children or financially either. So I would really recommend people give mediation a try first, and I think it really speaks to what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think mediation is the better way to go because it's just a calmer, more peaceful transition.
Yeah.
Than, like you said, it's like two dogs fighting. You know, you're just fighting, and things get nasty at court, and everybody's, the other side is trying to make your side look bad.
Right.
That's never a good situation. It's so toxic.
Yeah.
And I get there's anger, but I think you, as adults, you're adults, right? You're not children. So you need to figure out how to pull up your big boy britches or big girl britches and check your anger. Go to therapy, do whatever you need to do. Call a girlfriend, work it out, get away from your anger. Because if you're thinking from an emotional place, it's never going to be good. You're never going to make good decisions.
No, we've talked about this podcast before about reacting versus responding, being triggered, right?
Yeah.
All these things imply that, whatever emotion you're feeling, you're just acting out of that place. And, when you are going through a separation from a spouse, no matter how long you've been married, emotions are going to run high on both sides.
Yeah.
And, it's easy to fall into that trap of just reacting and thinking according to your emotions.
Yeah, and another thing I think is really important is to be transparent with your children. Mm-hmm. It's worse if they don't know what's happening. You're like, oh, everything's fine. Everything's not fucking fine.
Right.
Everything's awful.
Right.
Your child is suffering. I mean, one of the number one things, the first things I did, when I moved out and my daughter and I were laying, in bed and she's crying, I'm crying with her.
Yeah.
Because it was a really, really difficult thing.
Yeah.
I didn't want that.
Right.
But I knew that it wasn't healthy and it was toxic. And when your child turns around and yells at their father to stop yelling at their mother, then it's over. I mean, like, this is what I'm doing to my child? I don't think so. So I think you need to come at it with the perspective of I'm doing the right thing for my child in the long run, because I do not want my child to think that this is a healthy relationship.
Right.
Because that's going to be the model for what they think is healthy.
Oh, yeah.
So it's important that you say, look, these things happen. People grow apart. We're not on the same page anymore. At whatever age appropriate, you don't want to talk bad about the other parent, but you want to be transparent about what is happening, why it's happening, that their love for you your love for them has not changed. You love them as much today as you did, yes. I mean, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Whatever is happening between you and your ex and their father has nothing to do with them. It's not their fault. So if you have any guilt, get rid of it, because it's not going to serve you or your child. So I think it's important that you are transparent with them. You're honest with them. You let them know what's going on so they're not afraid. They understand. Be surprised, the resilience and capacity of a child to understand at any age what is happening.
Yeah.
Even as a toddler, like I Finn and I, we were doing meditation. That's when I started to get her to journal. She would draw pictures and she would talk about her feelings and I would write the feelings down. And I'm like, it's okay to be sad. I'm really sad. Let's cry together. This is hard. I love you. Your dad and I it's not good for us to be together.
Key thing, saying, hey, I know this is really hard.
Yeah. Validating it.
Or just asking, how do you feel?
Right. Well, that's what the journaling was for. I let her talk about her feelings and her anger, and it was challenging.
When you have a small child, you're not always going to be able to get them to express how they feel if they're 5 years old. How do you feel? That may not work, but you may say,
they're crying, right?
Do you feel sad, right?
Well, that's where I let her draw the pictures.
Yeah. And that works too, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to get them to be able to express their emotion.
Yes,
right?
get it out.
What am I feeling, right? To be able to express what I am feeling, right?
Yeah.
In a healthy way. No, that's really good. So, just to kind of level set what we talked about, right? Divorce is hard. Usually if you've made the decision to leave, separate from your spouse, and maybe you both decided or only one of you decided and the other one is angry at you for making that decision and they don't understand it. I remember prior marriage, somebody saying to me, well, you promised to death do us part. So, you have some people that you should never get divorced under any circumstances, right? So there's all kinds of things out there.
Yeah.
But assuming you get to the point where you're divorced, try and do it amicably. Make sure you're being open, honest with the children. But I think we said it, but you want to make sure the children hear this is not your fault. This isn't anything you did.
Yes.
It isn't, because a child might say, well, is it because I broke something in the kitchen that belonged to Daddy and Daddy was really upset? Is that why you're getting divorced?
Right. Well, understand that children are egocentric, right? The whole world revolves. That's just developmentally appropriate. As far as they're concerned, the world revolves around them because that's where they are. They're not, that's just how they are developmentally. It's not a bad thing. It's who they are. So when these things happen, they're going to think they did something. Right. It's their fault, right? Because everything is their, like if something goes wrong, it's their fault. It's your job as a parent to make sure you're clear on that they did nothing wrong.
Right.
That mommy and daddy still love you. This is not about you. This is about our inability to be on the same page. We're not good together anymore. I'm not my best version of myself with him.
Yeah,
with
we're
your
not
dad.
able to live together.
We can't live together. We're, whatever it is, I can't be the best version of myself with your father. We just kind of grew apart. Yeah. I do love him as your dad. You could say that even if it's a lie, you can use that word because it's not that you have to make sure that they realize that they're the other, there's no ill feelings. Even though you're angry at them for doing certain things, it doesn't mean you're angry at their behavior. I think you need to separate the person from the behavior always.
Yeah.
Right? I don't like the way, their behavior is this, their behavior is that, and I really struggle with that. Or whatever. I mean, you don't even have to bring it up. Just make sure you separate those two and just say it's not the person, it's the behavior and the ideas that we don't share anymore or, whatever it is, but try to separate the behavior from whatever it is you're angry about.
And I think this is where it's really good to use tools if you can. I wrote a couple of notes about some books that we had bought when my children were young, and I was going through the divorce before I met you. One was Dinosaur's Divorce, A Guide for Changing Families by Lori Krasny Brown and Mark Brown. And there was also Mama and Daddy Bear's Divorce by Cornelia Spellman. And if you do a search of, books about divorce for young children, you'll find these picture books. And what they do is they kind of tell the story for you in a way that a child can connect with, right?
Yeah.
And whether, dinosaurs, bears, right? And there's even books that help navigate, hey, daddy got remarried, mommy got remarried, mommy's having a baby with the new, with my stepfather, right? And all these things now that create big emotions, right? I mean, my father, when I was, my parents were 8 when they split up. And by the time I was 9, my father remarried. And I was 10 years old when one of my 3 half-sisters was born. So, those are things that now you have a child that's processing a separation, and then within a year or two, one of the parents or both parents remarried and are having children. Now, we didn't have that experience because we were a little older, but sometimes parents get remarried and have children with a new partner. So that's even more. So I think when you have these dynamics, that's where it's important to bring in the therapist always 100%, but books that help tell the story in a way that a child can see. Can you kind of normalize what it is that they're feeling? It's not, it's okay to feel confused, angry, frustrated, sad, right?
Yeah, they're going to feel all these things.
Move through those things.
I mean, depending on the age of the child, obviously they should be in therapy as well.
Yeah.
If they're a little older, 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe get them their own therapist that they can talk to about their feelings, because they might have anger, they might be angry with you. They're going to be angry. I mean, I think that's a normal and healthy response. Why did you break up our family? Why? I don't like this. I don't want to be separate. I don't want to live in 2 different households. Now daddy's got another partner and he's having a child. Am I even part of that family anymore?
Right.
They feel isolated. So it's tricky.
And back to the co-parenting, when one child has those feelings, what is not helpful is for the other parent to say, yeah, your father's selfish. Look, he went out and had another child already.
Yeah, you never want to say anything derogatory about the other
and that's
partner.
in every Children's Bill of Rights out there, right?
Right, yeah.
Don't talk badly
you never
about
want
the
to
other
do.
partner.
Unfortunately, I know I went through that,
Yeah.
And it was really, really awful and right in front of me. I mean, that was, it was such a stressful and difficult time. I mean, I look back and I don't even know, like I did everything I could to get ahead of it, to help my child. And apparently whatever I did worked, because they're an amazing 20-year-old now who's mature and loving and understanding. And I feel like, not perfect, but I did something
be
right.
Perfect,
yeah,
right?
Nothing's going to be perfect.
And you have to forgive yourself too, right? You're not going to do all of this right.
No, right. You're going to make mistakes.
You're going to say the wrong thing from time to time, but that's where the repair comes in
yes.
too, and be able to say to your child, I said something about your dad or your mom the other day, and that wasn't my best self.
Right. I'm sorry. I did not mean to say that. I should have not said it. And yeah, I didn't. I was wrong.
It's okay to repair, because kids need to be able to see that repair, that somebody can do something and then kind of make amends, or whatever the right word is for it, right? And be able to own up to it, own their behavior.
But then your child, you're modeling for your child.
Yeah.
How to deal with things, how to apologize. It's okay. And no ifs, ands, or buts. You just apologize without buts. But blah, blah, blah. No. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Period.
Yeah. No, that's
Period.
it. Be very clear.
Yeah.
I think a few other things to consider too around how to mitigate. So we've talked a lot about how to speak to your child and how to conduct yourself, but there's also other things that I would strongly recommend to kind of mitigate the impact of divorce on children. One of the things that was important to me was trying to keep the kids in the same school. And if they're in school, and that's not always able to be done, but if you can do it, you're trying to disrupt your child's lives as little as possible, right? And so if they're 5, 6, 7, I think any age. I mean, if you're 13, that's not a great time to switch schools either. And we went through that because we had to move for career reasons. But in the immediate aftermath of the separation, having to also move schools and make new friends at the same time, and I went through that.
Yeah,
very, very difficult. And then the other thing is the living arrangements, right? Now, you've got a situation where kids were used to only being in one household 7 days a week.
Right.
Now they're going to, like in my situation, we had joint physical custody. So the kids were 50% of the time in my ex-spouse's home, and 50% with me. So, and it was financially a stress, but they had, to the extent possible, their own rooms in each house, or a room that they shared with a step or half sibling. And they had their own clothes. They didn't go back and forth between houses with suitcases. They had stuffed animals in each house.
Yeah.
They had pictures in each house and drawings and things that told them, this is home, this is home. And there's a lot of books about that. Like, hey, now I have 2 houses, now I have 2 homes. And kind of in a way, also to tell the child, like, you're special, right?
Right.
Because your friends may have 1 home, you have 2.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's ways that you could change the perspective. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And mommy's happier and daddy's happier now.
Right.
Like, we're better apart than we were together. And we could be better parents to you now that we're not together. We don't live together.
Right.
So you have that, but you have to remember, children are born with all the emotions and none of the skills. And whether they're an adolescent, which is even more challenging because now everything's magnified, right? They're already dealing with being an adolescent, which is like, I think, a whole mental health issue in and of itself.
Yeah.
It's a challenging time. But I think it's really important that we remember that. And your children are going to be angry. They're going to lash out. They're going to say they hate you. They're having a hard time.
Right.
It's not personal. It's not disrespectful. Again, put yourself on the shelf and look at that child like, what are they trying to tell me? Obviously, they're angry, but you can't. Punishing them and yelling back at them and being angry with them because they said something to you and you taking it personally is not the way to go. Not the way to go. You need to try to, not try, you have to. You have to be, an adult.
You're accountable, responsible for our
and
actions.
Regulate your emotions and teach that child, how to regulate their emotion. Model the behavior you want to see in your child. So if you're losing it and you're like having a meltdown and you're, screaming at them and then punishing them, they're only going to duplicate that behavior right back.
Right.
They're going to mirror that behavior. So you want to teach them how to regulate their emotions, speak with respect. And you cannot take what they're going through personally.
That's right.
You cannot.
Yeah, they're going to say things or might feel hurtful if you allow it to be. Beyond the things we've talked about too, I think each parent, even on the days that you don't have the kids, you have to make an effort to be as present, as visible in their lives as you would be if the divorce hadn't happened.
Right.
Right. Because let's say you're a dad, which is more common, and you only have the kids every other weekend.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you're a bachelor the other 80% of the time and you don't show up at school plays or functions or things like that, or their soccer practice. So be as involved as you can be. That gives kids continuity too.
Right.
Sometimes even on days that I didn't have my kids, I picked my daughter up from dance. Or I went to that school play, so I didn't regard as, okay, on my non-visitation days, I have a completely different life that doesn't involve my kids.
Right.
So
no, it should always.
I made sure to be as involved as I possibly can.
Yeah. And that's the dynamics of co-parenting.
Yeah.
I can pick up the kids today. I mean, you can't, if one parent has like physical custody, right, and the other parent just has the child on the weekends, they could still be a part of their child's life, even though they're only seeing them every other weekend.
And I will tell you, that was something I actually built into my agreement with my ex, was that I wanted right of first refusal. If you were going to plan a trip away on the time that you were, according to the visitation schedule, supposed to have your children, I didn't want you leaving them with a babysitter.
Right, right.
Then I would be the babysitter. I'm the dad, right? The kid I felt that as long as I was available, then I should be able to have the kids if you weren't going to be around, or we could switch visitation. So that's another thing too. But that again requires open communication between both parents.
Right.
Last thing I want to find out, it was their weekend and they went away on a honeymoon trip, or whatever it was. Right. My spouse remarried and I did nothing, right, when I could have had the kids and done something with them. So, but again, that's open and honest communication, but also looking at when you're going through mediation, trying to think about it. And it's hard, right? Okay, what is the new order going to look like after we're separated? And to think about those. That's why we're having this podcast, because maybe you're in the situation. It's like, I never thought about that. I never thought about putting something in writing that said, if my spouse has the kids and they're going to be away without the kids, allow me to have them.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people would think about that.
Yeah. I mean, that's why you have a mediator. It's really important you go to somebody who can exhaust all of these, flesh out these thoughts, these things that you need to make sure are part of your agreement, because you're overwhelmed.
Right.
You're emotional. You're not thinking clearly. And how could you even begin to think of all the things that you want included in this divorce agreement? Right. I mean, like, if your partner drinks and has an alcohol issue, you have to make sure that it's in the agreement that if you suspect that they're drinking, that you can withhold visitation.
Right.
I mean, this is critical. If that
without using your child as a spy, what you don't want to do is when your child comes back on Sunday night or whatever it is, put him through 10 questions.
Right.
Was Daddy drinking? Did Daddy have a bottle that looked like this with red liquid in it? Did Daddy have a bottle that looked like this with brown liquid? You don't want to be. No kid wants to be interrogated. And by the way, there's no good age at which to separate from your spouse. I know when I was going through, people were like, well, why don't you wait till they're in middle school, or wait till they're in high school, or wait till they're 18?
No.
There's no... number one, back to your point, right? If you have a situation where you and your spouse have no relationship, you're disconnected or screaming at each other, that modeling that behavior and subjecting your kids to it is awful.
It's worse.
Right.
You better off getting a divorce.
So if that question, anybody's watching thinking, I wonder when the right time is. The right time is when you can no longer function and you've tried, and I don't want to sit here and advocate for divorce. If you have tried therapy,
right,
and you have irreconcilable differences, right? You've tried everything you can do to try and make the relationship work and it doesn't work, or you have a spouse that has some serious, dangerous things, right? That
Yeah.
there may be reasons, right? Infidelity, right? That sometimes there's no coming back from, the loss of trust. I don't want to sit here and say, don't try, just walk away from your spouse, especially when there's kids involved.
Yeah.
Try to save the relationship, but if that
Right.
all else has failed, there's no sense waiting
Right.
and subjecting children, this is my opinion,
Agreed.
to a bad relationship.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, definitely you want to do that. You want to try to exhaust every opportunity to save the relationship if you can. I mean, and you know who's a great resource to look at is Esther Perel.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You know, she has some amazing books, and she has lots of strategies. She has a podcast now. She has workshops. So if you're in a situation with your relationship and you're not sure how things are going to go, and you have children, that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Really, because I love her philosophy, the way she talks about it. She's very forthcoming. She doesn't pull any punches.
Yeah, and we have the link to her on our YouTube. But,
Yeah.
And the other thing I'd want to say related to this is, once you've separated, please try to allow some time before you bring, especially smaller children, I think any age, another romantic partner into the picture.
Yeah,
Right?
right.
The last thing you want to do is you moved out from your residence, and the next weekend you're having dinner with your new romantic partner with your kids. I mean, you want to talk about kids need time to process.
Yeah, that's a little. If you can avoid, do it when you don't have to.
Right.
You know,
you will have time when you, and I know we were somewhat careful. I mean, we dated for at least almost a little over 2 months, and before we were introduced to either of our kids.
August, September, October, November. When did we go to
October?
Yeah,
it was a couple months. So and it seems fast, but we didn't do it immediately, right? It wasn't like the second week. So, and probably people are watching, going, "Oh my God, I can't believe you did that." So, take as long as you can take.
Well, I mean, take as long as you can take, but you also know, like I think, I mean, the first time we got together with our kids, it was a play date.
Yeah.
With our children.
Right.
So we brought them to, it was about them.
Yeah, it wasn't like we were making out with each other. I don't think the kids at that age had any idea
that we were even together.
This was a relationship. I don't think they actually were processing why we were having a play date.
Yeah.
It was a friend of Daddy's, I think, is all I said.
Yeah. We were just friends at the time. And we had
weren't
children.
staying the night together in front of them or anything.
No. And the girls were like the same age. And we went to a movie, saw, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. I mean, we had play dates with them.
Yeah.
And we did that for a few months before they really didn't know for a while that we were romantically involved.
Or even what that meant. No, that didn't happen right away.
No.
I wanted to just share, so I downloaded this information. There's every state, the courts have some type of children's bill of rights.
Yeah.
For some, it's related to children in foster homes. For some, it's related to children that go through family separation and divorce. This one, I did a little research. It's from Travis County, Texas. And this list was composed by this attorney, Rob Robertson. And I just loved it because I thought it was the most comprehensive thing I've ever seen out there.
I was reading it yesterday. It's very comprehensive.
But it starts out by saying children love their parents and want to be with them. True. Even in times of great stress, parents have a responsibility to conduct their legal affairs in a manner that will protect their children from adult conflicts. Mm-hmm. And then it goes on to say, and there's a ton of bullet points here, I'm not going to read them all, but at a minimum, children are entitled to the following Bill of Rights. Neither parent shall deny the child reasonable use of the telephone to place and receive calls with the other parent.
Right.
That is a horrible thing. I remember being questioned when I was living with my dad at one point. Why are you calling your mom so much? Why is she calling here so much?
Yeah.
No child should ever be made to feel that they're having too much conversation with the other parent.
Yeah, I struggled with that when I was trying to talk to Savannah. And he wouldn't, I had a hard time with that. I would try to call and, what are you calling again for? Why are you calling so much? And like, why are you,
Oh,
I try to call my daughter.
I think the reverse is encouraging that. Like if the other parent never calls, right? Yeah. That could be problematic for the child too. It's like, Daddy not love me anymore, Mommy not love me anymore. So I think also too, saying, hey, when was the last time you talked to your dad or your mom? Why don't you give them a call? right? I think even when my oldest was living with us, I would say, when's the last time you talked to your mom? Oh, it's been a couple of weeks. Maybe you should give her a call. She might be wondering, how you're doing, right? So sometimes you have to encourage that as well, but you should never discourage it.
Right.
Neither parent shall speak or write derogatory remarks about the other parent. So, 100%, we covered that.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't even overhear you. It's not even directly saying something like your dad's an a-hole. They shouldn't even hear you on the phone talking to a friend like, I can't believe what he did this week, right?
Yeah.
They shouldn't even overhear you having that conversation.
Right.
100%. Neither parent shall physically or psychologically attempt to pressure or influence the child concerning the personal opinion or position of the child concerning legal proceedings. Mm-hmm. Right? It gets very tough. I actually had to go to family court as a child, and that was, I don't think any child should have to go through that. Permitting the child to display photographs of the other parents. I think you've got to be a certain kind of something to say, I don't want a picture of your mom or dad in your room in this house. Like,
awful.
I guess people do. That's why it's in here, right? You have to be able to allow that. The parents will acknowledge a child that they have two homes, though the child may spend more time at one home or the other. So one thing that we never said, this is your house and that's daddy's house, or this is my house and that's mommy's house. These are your houses.
Right.
You have two homes. Mm-hmm. And even in your situation where your spouse had less visitation than I did in my situation, your child still had their own room.
Yes.
And even today, they're 20 years old.
Yeah.
Your ex still has a room, even though they don't stay there. But if they really wanted to,
they could.
They have a room to themselves with a door. It's private. They don't.
And a private bath. Yeah.
What you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And again, some people just can't afford to, but as long as you can afford to, you don't want to have your child sleeping on the couch in the living room when they come over to your house.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
That if nothing else says, this is not my home. I'm like a visitor here, if maybe even an unwanted visitor. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, especially if they have to sleep on the couch and you throw them the sheets and a pillow at 10 o'clock, say, go ahead, and nothing's set up for them.
That's awful, yeah.
So you have to, all these little things matter, and
right.
how children feel. Greeting cards, even, who thinks about that, right? Like remembering it's your spouse's birthday or it's Valentine's Day. Like, hey, did you make a Valentine's Day card for your mom? Did you get your mom a gift? All those little things.
Right.
Never use a child as a middleman. Well, you tell your father. No, never.
No.
never do that. Never talk about love, like who loves them more than the other. I love you more than dad does.
No, that's awful.
I buy you more stuff than dad does, or anything like that. Never anything that's going to put them in a situation that's obviously going to make them feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Don't discuss child support issues with them.
Ugh.
Yes. But I've been guilty of that because kids would ask me for money. I'm like, well, that's why you give your mom child support. Well, that's not the best response.
No, that's true.
But I've done that.
Yeah.
I've done that. Neither parent will engage in judgmental, opinionated, or negative commentary, physical inspections, or interrogations once the child arrives from his home. Oh, who did daddy have over this weekend? Where did he take you? What did you guys do? Did he feed you? What did he feed you? Mm-hmm. Did he not feed you? Did he, was there another person around? Was he drinking, right? Nobody wants to.
Right.
Now, you can ask your child, like, how was your weekend with dad? Well, what was the highlight of the weekend?
Right, I would do that, yeah.
What
did you guys do all weekend?
Was there anything that made you uncomfortable? Mm-hmm. Right? I think you have the right to ask that, especially if you're concerned about the child's safety. So what we're not saying is don't ask your child anything, but it's how you do it.
Right.
It's how you do it.
Yeah.
If they say, I didn't feel right. Like, why? Tell me more.
Right.
About that. Neither parent will ever permit the child to be transported by a person who is intoxicated due to consumption of alcohol or illegal drugs.
Right.
That is never okay. And as you said before, you have every right to take action. And generally, you will get support from the courts on those things. That's
I had that in my agreement. Yeah.
Smoking tobacco. You should never smoke in structures or vehicles occupied by the child. Right?
No.
Why subject them to that? And finally, the last thing, which I think is really wonderful, each parent permits a child to carry gifts, toys, clothing, and other items belonging to the child with him to the residence of the other parent, or back and forth, or leave something there. Or maybe pets. I mean, there was a time where my daughter brought a dog back and forth, right? Yeah. I mean, that may not always be feasible, but what you never want to say is like, you can't bring that to your dad's because I'm afraid you're going to leave it there, right?
My daughter brought her dog to dad's all the time.
Right. And also a stuffed animal, right?
Right. Well, yeah.
So I mean, there are, but I guess this is here because a parent might say, well, I don't want you taking that to dad's. I'm afraid it's not going to come back, right? No.
Yeah.
If that's what they need to be comfortable, it's a blanket,
right,
a book, a doll, whatever it is, allow them to bring those things back and forth. That was kind of the highlights I had off of this. I mean, is there anything else that stands out to you that you kind of supported or you think that helped make everything better over time?
No, I think we covered it all. I can't think of anything offhand that, I think we covered everything.
I think the biggest thing is, though, is even, so we moved here almost 7 years ago. And at that time, we had 2 teenage children, yours and mine, and we had another one up in New York, and it was hard. But and then your ex-spouse moved here, but mine was still up in New York. So one thing I found is that with my ex, that we communicated quite a bit. We probably were talking every week about where the kids were at, what they needed, what they were going through. So we had, even though we weren't in the same household and we were no longer together, that open communication was so critical during that time when they were in high school, just to make sure that we could support them and created this awareness. So we didn't have a gap. And I will say my relationship right now with my ex is so good that even her husband will at times call me on his own to kind of ask me, like, what do I think about this? Or what do I think about the approach you're doing? Or there are times where the 3 of us have been on it, or the 4 of us have been on a call together about something like, where it was more critical. So I think that's the biggest thing is like, whatever happened, and why we're no longer in the relationship, but we're gonna keep our communication, and we're gonna do this because we want to make sure that it's the best outcome for our children,
for the child, right?
And like you said, putting your anger aside.
Yeah.
Your conflict aside, so you can do what's in the best interest of the child.
Yeah, and I know that's really hard. It's challenging.
It's hard.
It's not an easy thing to do, and you're not going to be able to do it all the time, every day.
Right.
But you have to remember who's going to pay the price for this. Not you. It's your child. And if, most people don't want that to happen to their kids. They want to be able to, to be able to process and be resilient, and they won't. I mean, they can hold on to that trauma if they're not allowed or feel like they're not safe to feel and have permission to feel.
Yeah, permission to feel. Quoting from, that's Mark Brackett.
Mark Brackett,
that's the name of his book.
Yeah.
So, and like we always do, when you go into the notes for the podcast, you'll see all the people have inspired us around communication and feelings and working on relationships. I know we've covered a lot, and this might be a hard topic for some people, but we always welcome comments and feedback. If somebody has some strong feelings about this or
questions
or anything that we've said that you don't agree with and you have a different opinion on, please share that too. These are our experiences, our beliefs, our opinions. Things that we've kind of hung on to that we like, but it doesn't mean we're right about everything for every situation.
Yeah, I mean, we're not saying, the children are the priority, but you do need to take care of yourself, which is why you do that. You get a therapist, get some friends, make sure self-care is critical because you need to be able to bring 100% of yourself and your best self, especially during this really stressful time. Right. It's not easy navigating these waters, but you can do it, and you can do it successfully and have a path forward if you are able to keep your emotions in check and focus on the well-being of your children.
Yep. And it takes a village. And the more that 2 different families can collaborate, especially when you start getting step parents involved and other relatives, working collaboratively, it does pay off.
Yep.
All right. Anything else you got? I'm
No,
good.
I'm good.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. And
Yep.
again, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to share. And I hope you liked this podcast. If you did, please like it and visit our Instagram page.
Subscribe.
And subscribe.
And thank you for listening.
Thank you. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.